My elder brother had his kneecaps dug out and was dumped at our doorstep. The enemy was so arrogant that he said right in front of my father, "Killing you is no different from crushing an ant." Only at that moment did I understand that in this world, if you're not strong, you can't even protect your family. At 14, I finally stopped pretending to be useless. My name is Asura, the youngest son of the Grand General who protects the nation in the Kingdom of Ally, and I am 14 this year. At this moment, I am sprawled over my desk copying medical texts, my right hand racing across the page, while my left hand rubs my swollen backside from the beating my old man gave me, and I keep yelping in pain. My butt burns with pain. Every movement feels like needles stabbing me. He really hit hard. Am I even his biological son? And my grandfather too. Wasn't it just one of his pill furnaces that I blew up? Did he really have to go off traveling to clear his head right after tattling on me? My name is Asura, and my family has served in the military for 3 generations. My grandfather, Adolf, helped the royal family conquer territory and found the nation, winning the family estate we have today. My father, Afontian, single-handedly founded the mountain-shaking army, the strongest fighting force in the Kingdom of Ally. My mother, Qin Lan, is a wood element mage, gentle and virtuous. My grandfather on my mother's side, Qin Zongren, is a famous physician and alchemist with considerable prestige in the Kingdom of Ally. But the Kingdom of Ally is only one of the 14 vassal states of the Valency Empire. And on this continent of kings, its power is as weak as an ant. In this family, my eldest brother, Anagia, excels in both letters and martial arts. At 18, he is already a first-stage martial master, deeply versed in military strategy and tactics, and able to lead troops into battle on his own. My second brother, Asubo, is 15, a third-stage warrior, obsessed with the martial path and uninterested in anything else, determined to get into August Academy this year. My little sister, Azia, is 12, graceful and lovely, and has awakened the same wood element magic talent as our mother. She is already a second-stage magic apprentice, with limitless potential ahead of her. And I am the problem child they all talk about. I was exceptionally clever from childhood, with a photographic memory and extraordinary comprehension. But I used all that cleverness on crooked tricks. I liked neither literature nor martial arts. All I liked was climbing onto roofs and tearing off tiles. Chasing dogs and chickens, one word for it, play. The family hired several tutors to teach me. I angered 3 of them into quitting and 2 into fainting. Whenever the day came for testing and inspection, I would flip through the books in advance and, relying on my photographic memory, muddle through well enough. My father was so furious that he threw me into the mountain-shaking army, hoping military life would temper my character. And what happened? In the dead of night, the emergency assembly drums sounded, and the entire camp of soldiers ran out in confusion. Only after standing there for half an hour did they realize they had been pranked, and they went back to sleep cursing. When soldiers squatted in the latrine, firecrackers suddenly exploded out of the cesspit, sending crap and piss flying over 3 meters high. Butter was smeared on the warhorses' saddles, so the cavalry slid right off as soon as they sat down, falling black and blue. Everyone knew I was the one behind it, but every time I had arranged a perfect alibi. The officers gnashed their teeth in rage but couldn't catch any evidence. That was, until Deputy General Han Dang found a toad in his steamed bun. This iron-tough man in the prime of life knelt at the gates of the general's residence and bawled his eyes out, utterly heartbroken, begging my father to take me away, or else he would kneel there forever. That was how I got hauled back home to continue wreaking havoc in the general's residence. Whenever my father was so angry with me that the veins on his forehead bulged, my grandfather would just stroke his beard and laugh, saying the third boy would surely amount to something great in the future. My mother was even more protective. If my father hit me a few times, she would hold me and glare at him, as if saying that if he dared hit me again, she wouldn't let him into her bed tonight. The bond among the 4 siblings was astonishingly good. I never bullied my brothers or sister. Whenever I was punished, my 2 older brothers would kneel down to plead for mercy, even willing to take the punishment in my place. My younger sister would immediately run off to fetch reinforcements, to rescue her third brother who refused to repent. I didn't want to practice martial arts, because I thought training meant hardship, and hardship meant no happiness or joy. But I couldn't help being naturally gifted. And relying on the insights I gained from watching my brothers practice martial arts while being made to stand as punishment, along with the physical toughness tempered by getting beaten, I somehow skipped past the martial apprentice stage and advanced to first stage warrior. As for this beating, it started because I secretly snuck into my grandfather's alchemy room. From one of his medical books, I saw a record saying that when mages refine pills, they can infuse magic elements into the pills, which can improve the quality of the pills. Once my curiosity was piqued, I slipped into the alchemy room. At the time, there was a batch of calming pills being refined in the pill furnace. But I had never learned how to use magic, so I didn't know how to release magic elements. My clever brain immediately came up with a solution. I might not understand how to mobilize magic elements, but I did understand the body's meridians. I silently sensed the lightning element magic within my body and guided it to travel through my meridians. At first, the lightning element was fairly obedient, running through the various meridians and exploring. But before long, the lightning element grew bigger and bigger like a snowball, becoming more and more uncontrollable. Its speed increased, and it grew more and more violent. Cold sweat streamed down my forehead. I knew I had overplayed my hand. Gritting my teeth, I focused my mind and raised my hand, forcing the lightning element out through the Laogong acupoint in my palm. A silver ball of light the size of a grape flickered, brightening and dimming, and slowly floated toward my grandfather's pill furnace. I vaguely sensed a trace of danger, a kind of uncontrollable danger. I quickly ran to the door of the alchemy room and peeked inside with half my head sticking through the doorway. The moment the ball of light touched the pill furnace, boom! A thunderous roar like a lightning strike echoed through the alchemy room. My grandfather's favorite level 3 pill furnace was blasted full of cracks, and the pill room was left in complete disarray. And who knew where the pills in the furnace had been blown off to? I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead and, without a second thought, ran outside. Just as I was about to run out of the building, I crashed head-on into my grandfather, who had rushed back after hearing the thunder. One look at my shifty, darting eyes, and my grandfather knew the matter must have something to do with me. He grabbed me by the back of the collar and took me straight to the alchemy room. When he saw the pill furnace covered in cracks, he froze. It was a pill furnace forged from top-grade materials. Even my father couldn't crack it with a full-force blow. Suppressing his anger, my grandfather asked, "You little brat, how did you turn my pill furnace into this? Tell me the truth." I knew full well that I absolutely couldn't confess to this, even if I were beaten to death. Stiffening my neck, I said, "It had nothing to do with me. I had just walked over here when I heard the explosion. I got scared and ran outside, and that's when I bumped into you." My grandfather pressed me several more times, but I stubbornly insisted it wasn't my fault, and even turned the blame back on him, saying he had blown up the furnace himself while refining pills. He was so angry that his vision went black in waves. He grabbed me and tossed me to my father, then left to travel and clear his mind without looking back. My dad beat me until my skin split and my flesh tore. This time, Mother was also upset that I had driven grandfather away. And unusually, she didn't protect her cub. My brothers and sister lowered their heads and didn't dare make a sound. After beating me for quite a while, Dad also knew he couldn't beat submission into me, this unfilial son. He comforted himself that he still had 2 good sons and 1 good daughter, then let out a sigh and stopped, saying in a deep voice, "Get your ass to the study and copy the medical text for me. If you don't finish, you don't eat." With that, he turned and left. I lay in the study copying books, my stomach growling with hunger. I really didn't need to read the book at all. I had already memorized that medical text backward and forward. I just wanted to finish copying it quickly. A young lad's stomach can't afford to miss a single meal. In truth, I had a secret hidden in my heart. A secret I had never told anyone. When I was 10, I awakened a magical talent, and it was a rare one at that, lightning magic. I could clearly sense the silver magical elements in the air. But why had I never mentioned it to anyone? Because I was afraid my family would force me to study magic diligently if they found out. Then how was I supposed to play happily? So for all these years, I kept it hidden. It wasn't until my younger sister awakened her with magic talent and Mother was teaching her the basics of magic that I secretly learned how to do magical meditation from the side. The first time I meditated hidden under the covers, the silver lightning magic elements cheerfully entered my body. My affinity with them was extremely high. But what I didn't know was that along with the silver lightning elements, some gray magical elements also entered my body, and as soon as they did, they vanished without a trace. As a complete magic newbie, I naturally couldn't notice it. And so, I kept this secret until now. The door quietly opened a crack, and a little head with hair tied in 2 buns peeked in. Third brother. It was my younger sister, Ajia. The moment I saw it was her, I immediately tossed aside my brush and held out my left hand. "Hand it over. I'm starving." Grinning, my sister pulled out a big chunk of sauced beef from her clothes, then skillfully picked up the brush and helped me copy the book. We were perfectly in sync in scenes like this. Whenever I was being punished and forbidden to eat, she always came to bring me food. Gnawing on the beef, I asked, "Has Father's anger gone down yet?" She curled her lips. "You really made Father furious, and Mother is angry too. Usually she tells me to bring medicine for your wounds, but this time she only told me to bring food." The moment she mentioned medicine, my butt started hurting even more. Baring my teeth, I complained, "Why do they beat only me every single day out of 4 children? 30 years east of the river, 30 years west of the river. Just wait until I become #1 in the world in martial arts. What exactly do you want to do?" A stern voice sounded from the doorway. Father stood there with a dark face. Every hair on my body stood on end. Startled, my sister put down the brush and slipped out. I immediately put on a fawning expression. "Once I become #1 in the world, I'll certainly return to the kingdom of Owlai in glory, bring honor to the A family, and let everyone under heaven know that a tiger father has no dog son. I'll make powerful experts from all sides come ask you for advice on how to raise such an outstanding son. And then, under your wise leadership, I'll make the A family the #1 family in the world." The corners of Father's mouth twitched, and his hand again itched to hit someone. But he didn't strike. Instead, he sat down. After a long silence, he finally said quietly, "No matter how naughty you are, your grandfather always said that the 3rd boy would accomplish great things in the future." I instinctively replied, "Grandfather really has a good eye for people." The vein on Father's forehead twitched again. Suppressing his anger, he continued, "Among the 4 of you siblings, you have the highest natural talent. Your eldest brother has to inherit the family business and lead troops in a battle, so he has spent a great deal of time studying military strategy and tactics, which has limited his achievements in martial arts. Your second brother is rigid and doesn't know how to adapt, and his talent and aptitude are limited. The A family also has no martial techniques that can raise his combat power. Your little sister has good talent, but she's just as playful as you are, and the A family doesn't have the resources to support a high-level mage. But if you devoted yourself to cultivation, your achievements would be the highest in our family." It was the first time I'd ever heard Father say such things, and I fell silent. He said a lot. He said that the kingdom of Owlai was only a small vassal state of the Valencia Empire, and that the A family was merely a minor hereditary general's house. He said that wars in the surrounding region had been continuous, and that civil officials at court were impeaching the A family for wielding military power too heavily. It would not be an exaggeration to say there were troubles at home and threats abroad. He said that he had been stuck at the 3rd stage of Great Martial Master for many years, unable to break through. He said that at his peak, Grandpa was a 2nd stage magic warrior, but after a lifetime on the battlefield and several serious injuries, he fell to the 1st stage of Great Martial Master. We all know where our martial path's limit lies. For our family to continue peacefully, every one of you needs to strive. This world is not as beautiful as you imagine. The survival of the fittest is an eternal truth." He patted my shoulder and left. I stood alone in the study for a long time. Then I picked up the brush and continued copying the medical text, writing very slowly and very carefully this time. For the first time in 14 years, it was this quiet. When the sky in the distance turned pale with dawn, I finished copying the medical text and fell asleep, slumped over the desk. Even in my sleep, my brows were tightly furrowed. I wasn't awakened until a burst of noisy footsteps and the servants' panicked cries. "Somebody come quick. The eldest young master is in trouble." I jolted to my feet, and a sense of foreboding surged in my heart. Ignoring the pain in my body, I rushed like mad toward the mansion gate. When I got there, I saw my second brother Asubo sitting on the ground with red-rimmed eyes, holding our eldest brother, who was covered in wounds and unconscious. Father was roaring in fury, second brother was cursing angrily, mother was weeping, and the servants were shouting in panic. Eldest brother lay in second brother's arms covered in wounds, blood soaking the clothes around both knees, his breathing faint. He had been thrown by the culprit at the entrance of the general's mansion. My mind went blank. The next second, I turned and ran back to the courtyard to fetch silver needles. Using the meridian opening acupuncture technique Grandpa had taught me, I stopped eldest brother's bleeding and tried to save him. When I discovered that eldest brother had multiple fractures all over his body, and that someone had dug out both his kneecaps, I could no longer suppress my rage. Just then, a mocking laugh came from the street. A young man in fine clothes emerged from the shadows with 4 martial artists, saying as he walked, crying that miserably, "Did he die? I clearly told them to leave him alive. How is he this fragile? Ha ha ha." Before he could finish speaking, I had already shot forward like a shadow, silver needles clutched in my hand as I thrust them toward his eyes. I was going to make sure this bastard would never laugh again. Before I could even reach him, a martial artist behind him kicked me several meters away. I spat out a mouthful of blood, got back up, and charged again. It was as if I couldn't feel any pain. The martial artist swung a punch with a savage grin. This time, a tall figure stepped in front of me and took the punch head-on. It was my father. The martial artist was knocked back several steps and chuckled lightly. So the great general of the mountain-shaking army is only this much. Father suppressed his fury and asked, "It was you who injured my son Naga? Why were you so cruel? Do you really think our family is easy to bully?" The finely dressed young man blustered, inwardly weak. "Others may fear you, Afontion, but this young master does not. Listen well, this young master is Saint-Gobain, the legitimate eldest son of the Saint-Gobain family. Even the king of your Ole kingdom has to be polite when he sees me. What are you, a gatekeeping general worth?" The Saint-Gobain family, a martial arts clan of Ole kingdom. The family head and the great elder are both third-stage magic warriors, existences in this tiny Ole kingdom not constrained by imperial authority. Saint-Gobain said viciously, "This young master took a fancy to your son's fiancée, Sue Inger, but that bitch would rather die than submit, shaved her head, and was determined to die. Then I'll cripple your son and see whether she'll still marry him." Ha ha ha. Before the laughter had ended, a flash of blade light, carrying the sound of slicing wind, chopped toward his face. Grandfather stood in the middle of the scene holding a broadsword, hair and beard bristling. "You have gone too far in bullying our family. Do you really think this old man can no longer wield a blade?" Saint-Gobain was pulled behind his subordinates, his face covered in cold sweat from fright. Furious and embarrassed, he said, "Old bastard, just try touching me again. I know your realm has fallen greatly. I have 2 third-stage great martial masters on my side. You and your son may be able to withstand this, but can the others? If you dare lay a hand on me, I'll start a massacre in your family." Grandfather was trembling with rage. This old general, who had spent his life on the battlefield, had never suffered such humiliation. But for the sake of keeping the clansmen behind him from being harmed, he had no choice but to lower the broadsword in his hand. Second brother held eldest brother and raised his bloodshot eyes to glare at Saint-Gobain, swearing an oath. "I will remember today's grudge, and one day I will come to collect it in person. I will not let a single one of those who harmed my eldest brother go." Saint-Gobain was startled by that look, then immediately said viciously, "I know you, Asura. Aren't you trying to get into Augustus Academy? Let me tell you, stop dreaming. I'll station spies all around, and I won't let you take even a single step out of Olei. Today it's only because we're inside the city, and our Blackwater family made an agreement with the royal family years ago not to kill within the city. Once you leave the city, killing you will be as easy as crushing an ant." Second brother's eyes were blood red, and his clenched fists creaked loudly. This bastard not only wanted to ruin eldest brother, he also wanted to cut off his martial path dream. As for me, hearing Saint-Gobain's arrogant words, I was instead strangely calm. I stared fixedly at the faces of those men, etching each and every one of their features into my mind. I knew that right now there was nothing I could do, but I swore that I would make these bastards suffer torment 100 times worse than what eldest brother was enduring now. A blood debt must be repaid in blood. The once troublesome boy who only knew how to play seemed to grow up in this very instant. Saint-Gobain glanced at us disdainfully, spat on the ground, and swaggered away. Behind him, a young boy stared fixedly at his departing figure until the group disappeared at the end of the street. Half a month later, at the general's residence, the entire manor was shrouded in silence. The servants all walked with extreme care, afraid of making even the slightest sound. Anaga, dressed in white, sat in a wheelchair with a calm expression, neither joyful nor sorrowful. He held a military treatise in his hands, but had not turned a page for a long time. Asura no longer immersed himself in the martial training ground. After eldest brother's accident, he often drank himself into a stupor, muttering nonsense and shouting wildly. Adolf remained silent. The old man always went alone either to the ancestral hall or to his late wife's grave, murmuring over and over words about being sorry to the family. Mother Qinlan was even more tearful day after day, searching through the medical books father had left behind before setting off on his travels, hoping to make her eldest son stand up again. She knew that even if father were here, he still would not be able to make eldest brother stand again. But somewhere between heaven and earth there must be miraculous elixirs that could rebuild his bones. But such heavenly treasures were not something a mere general's residence in Little Olei could obtain. Whenever she saw eldest brother sitting in the wheelchair, her heart ached as if cut by knives. Afontian still traveled back and forth between the military camp and the general's residence every day, his face showing neither joy nor sorrow, but the two sudden streaks of white hair at his temples added a few more traces of haggardness to the head of the household. Ajia said nothing. The usually lively little girl had also lost the smile on her face. She practiced wood element magic every day. She had heard that there was yellow rank wood element magic that could heal the seriously wounded, and though she had never even seen blue rank magic, she resolved to learn such yellow rank magic. Asura locked himself in his room for 3 days and 3 nights without eating or drinking. No one knew what the boy was doing or thinking in the room. He simply hated his own helplessness at the time. He wrote a letter to his future sister-in-law, the one who had shaved her head, telling her that eldest brother would definitely stand up again and marry her into the family. He, Asura, swore on his life that within 10 years he would eradicate the Blackwater family. At the end of the letter, he solemnly addressed her as sister-in-law and told her to take care. On the morning 3 days later, Asura slowly walked out of his room and headed straight for the training ground. Standing in the center of the training ground, the sunlight shone on his still somewhat youthful profile. Looking at the rows of weapons on the rack, he had just reached to pick one up when he drew his hand back, seeming a little afraid and a little embarrassed. After a moment of silence, the boy reached again for a broadsword on the weapon rack and, relying on his memories of how father had taught his older brothers, began practicing move by move. The training ground had once been the place the boy least wanted to come to, and the weapons on the rack were also the things he least wanted to touch. But now his eyes were filled with resolve. He only hated that he had awakened too late, only resented that he had taken up the blade too late. Just as Asura was drenched in sweat practicing with the blade, there came a bang as something heavy hit the ground. Asura quickly turned to look and saw Asubo, clutching a wine jar, had fallen to the ground. Asura hurried over to help his second brother up and said, "Second brother, drink less. I know you're upset, and you still have to take the Augustus Academy exam soon. You can't go on like this." To his surprise, after hearing this, Asubo let out a desolate laugh for quite a while before saying, "Shura, you're doing pretty well with the blade. I can't go take the Augustus Academy exam anymore. I'm fine. After drinking for 2 more days, I won't drink anymore, so don't worry." Asura said in shock. "Why aren't you going, second brother? Wasn't getting into Augustus your ambition? Are you afraid of retaliation from the Heishui family?" Gazing at the wine jar, Asubo said slowly, "The Heishui family is an enemy I am determined to destroy. How could I be afraid of some Heishui family? Big brother can't stand up now. The A family needs me, and the Hanzhan army needs me. I will do what big brother couldn't finish, and I will protect the family. Augustus Academy is no longer important." After saying that, Asubo looked at his younger brother Asura, who was stunned speechless. He patted his shoulder and said, "Third brother, actually, your talent is much higher than mine. In the future, you will be the family's hope. You must carry second brother's dream and go study at the academy, and one day become a renowned powerhouse on this continent. This is second brother's dream, and I'll have to rely on you to help me realize it." Asura had never thought about any of this. He had never thought that after big brother fell, second brother would also have to give up his own dream and stand at the front of the family. He looked into Asubo's eyes and saw the helplessness and hope in them. He said nothing and nodded heavily. At that moment, a voice carrying authority and a trace of weariness sounded from behind them. "Third brother, are you really willing to go to the academy to cultivate?" Afontian slowly walked up before the two brothers, looking at them with incomparably mixed emotions. Without much thought, Asura nodded and replied, "Yes, father. I want to get into Augustus Academy. When I return after completing my studies, I will seek revenge on the Heishui family." Looking at the two brothers, Afontian slowly sighed. "I have failed in my duty as a father and disappointed you." The two brothers shook their heads at the same time, and Asura spoke first. "The rise and fall of the family is everyone's responsibility. It's time for us to shoulder the duty of protecting the family." Looking at this boy with a faint sorrow hanging between his brows, Afontian saw that the boy who always loved to smile had not smiled for a long time. But they were right. The family's rise and fall would be entrusted to them. Afontian said sternly, "First, your second brother must take over your eldest brother's position as Deputy General of the Hanzhan Army. Second, it is said that the Heishui family has planted spies in every town leading to Augustus Academy, all carrying your second brother's portrait. The moment they discover Subwa, they will strike to kill." Asura immediately responded, "Father, don't you still have me? I'll set out for Augustus Academy at once. I will definitely pass the Burkush and enter the academy. Afontion shook his head and said, you can't go to Augustus Academy. The Heishui family is watching all the routes, and I'm afraid something might happen if you go alone. Your grandfather and I can't leave the family either, so we can't escort you to the academy. Besides, no matter which academy it is, the assessment standard is reaching warrior level 3 or mage level 3 before the age of 16 to qualify for admission. You are only warrior level 1 now, and there are less than 6 months left before the academy assessment. You won't pass it. The academy only recruits once every 3 years, and by the next recruitment, you will have exceeded the age limit. Asura was full of unwillingness. He lowered his head and pondered for a while before suddenly saying, Father, I have a way to pass the assessment and enter the academy. The Valencia Empire doesn't have only one academy. If I can't go to Augustus Academy, then I'll go to the distant Saint-Gobain Academy. Although I am only warrior level 1 now, I believe I will definitely reach warrior level 3 within 6 months. I must get into Saint-Gobain Academy. Afontion was stunned by the boy's firm and resolute words. After thinking for quite a while, he finally said, this is no child's play. Saint-Gobain Academy is on the other side of the empire, very far from us. There are countless dangers along the way, and you've never left Ally City your whole life. How can we be at ease? Besides, how would you have time to improve your martial cultivation while traveling? Even if you reached Saint-Gobain Academy, you still wouldn't pass the assessment. This plan won't work. Asura looked steadfastly at his father and shouted loudly, Father, please believe that I can definitely do it. I will grow and become stronger at Saint-Gobain Academy, then come back and personally wash away the humiliation of our family. Asubwa also said from the side, Father, I believe third brother can do it. We all know he is the smartest and most talented. Afontion said slowly, there are so many gifted geniuses in the academies, and the outstanding young talents of the King's continent all go to apply to the major academies. Don't think you're all that smart or talented. Don't be a frog at the bottom of a well. Afontion paused, closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Since you are willing to go out and make your own way, then I will support you. But promise me one condition. Before you have truly grown strong, you must act with a low profile and grow quietly. Even if you don't get into an academy, you must still wander outside to cultivate and become stronger. You have been restless and unruly since childhood, and that is what worries me about you. Our family can no longer withstand any more upheaval. Can you promise me this one request? Asura lowered his head and thought for a while before saying, I promise you, I will definitely keep a low profile and play the pig to eat the tiger. Afontion looked deeply at his youngest son and said, come to the martial arts ground early tomorrow morning. I will pass on to you the family's ultimate art, Thunderbolt Fist. After you learn it, set out as soon as possible to pursue your studies. Do not let me down. With that, he turned and left. The next morning, Asura appeared early in the center of the martial arts ground in fitted training clothes, waiting for his father to arrive. Afontion came before him looking somewhat tired. As he looked at the handsome young man before him, now nearly as tall as himself, a sense of pride rose in his heart for no reason. He thought to himself, my seed is indeed excellent. All 4 of my children are so outstanding. Meanwhile, the Asura standing opposite him looked at the uncontrollable smile at the corner of his father's mouth with a face full of question marks. And when he saw the faint fingernail scratches on the right side of his father's neck, he was completely baffled. What he did not know was that after Afontion told Qinlan of his decision last night, Qinlan had almost fought him to the death, even taking out her magic staff. It was only after much persuasion that he managed to calm his wife down. He, too, had his unavoidable difficulties. The Heishui family was using connections to pressure the king of Ally into dealing with the A family, and Asura's departure might be the best choice. Steadying himself, Afontion said sternly, time is pressing. I will now teach you the family's inherited ultimate art, Thunderbolt Fist. You must memorize it carefully. After mastering it, set out immediately for the academy, understand? Asura nodded vigorously. I will study it carefully. After saying that, Afontion said no more and immediately began personally demonstrating the 8 forms of the Thunderbolt Fist in the training ground. As he demonstrated, he explained the key points of the martial technique and his personal insights and understanding to the boy. Asura stood to the side, watching his father's every move without even blinking. The martial techniques and magic skills of the King's continent are divided into 5 tiers. From low to high, they are white tier, green tier, blue tier, purple tier, and yellow tier. The higher the tier, the rarer it is. The The Thunderbolt Fist passed down in the A family is a blue-tier martial technique. Even the entire royal family of the Kingdom of Ally might not necessarily possess a purple-tier martial technique, let alone a yellow-tier one. The blue-tier Thunderbolt Fist is an extremely fierce and powerful boxing art. After fully mastering the boxing art, every punch will produce the sound of thunder and be accompanied by internal force that penetrates the body to injure the enemy. When practiced to minor accomplishment, it will produce 2 thunderclaps and 2 bursts of penetrating internal force. When practiced to major accomplishment, it will produce 3 thunderclaps accompanied by 3 bursts of penetrating internal force, each stronger than the last. Avenge had devoted nearly 30 years of hard work to the Thunderbolt Fist and had already trained it to major accomplishment. Fast as thunder, powerful enough to pierce stone. Each of the 8 moves of the boxing art carried 3 peals of thunder with every punch. It could be said that he had trained this boxing art to its peak. After the final punch and its 3 peals of thunder, Avenge finished and withdrew, calmed his surging chi and blood, then turned and asked his 3rd son, who was standing to the side. "This is the Thunderbolt Fist, the supreme art of my family. I always wanted to teach it to you before, but you refused to learn. Now that you've watched me perform it once, how much have you remembered?" Asura tilted his head and thought for a moment before replying. "I remembered all of it." Avenge paused when he heard this. Then, thinking of his 3rd son's extraordinary memory, said, "Very good. Then perform it once for me to see. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Focus on feeling how the force is exerted in the boxing art." Hearing this, Asura stepped forward 2 paces and stood firm, the youth brimming with heroic spirit. He lowered his head and recalled the movements and key points of the boxing art his father had just demonstrated. Then he suddenly raised his head and began performing the boxing art move by move. At first, Avenge watched from the side with a stern expression, but the more he watched, the more shocked he became. Every movement of his 3rd son's punches was exactly right. Even some of the finer details were done very well. The only question was whether he had used the force exertion techniques of the martial skill correctly. But then, with the single peal of thunder from the final punch, Avenge froze on the spot, as if a bolt of heavenly thunder had truly struck his body. When Asura heard that peal of thunder, he was overjoyed. He knew that if there was thunder, it meant there was nothing wrong with the Thunderbolt Fist he had performed. Though unfortunately, only the final punch had the sound of thunder. He turned to look at his father, hoping his father could give him some pointers. But when he looked at his father, Avenge, he found him standing motionless with his mouth slightly open, staring at him. Asura called out "Father" twice before snapping Avenge out of his shock. Suppressing the turmoil in his heart, he slowly asked the boy, "Not bad. Have you practiced the Thunderbolt Fist before?" Asura shook his head and said, "I know big brother and second brother can use this set of boxing techniques, but I hadn't watched them practice before. I used to get a headache whenever I saw martial training." After hearing this, Avenge slowly let out a heavy breath and said, "Then practice well. Remember the essential movements and the way to exert force. Once every punch carries the sound of thunder, you can set out." The boy nodded heavily and replied, "I will work hard and master it as soon as possible." Hearing this, Avenge waved his hand for the boy to continue, while he himself turned and left with his hands clasped behind his back. But his right hand, clenched so tightly it had turned pale, revealed the unrest in his heart. Thinking back to those days, he too had been 14 when Adolf had taught him the Thunderbolt Fist face-to-face. Adolf had demonstrated it a full 3 times before he remembered the movements and techniques. On the 8th day of practice, he finally produced a single peal of thunder. He clearly remembered his father Adolf nodding with satisfaction and smiling. He was praised as a naturally gifted boxer. And now it was his turn to teach his children fist technique. The eldest, Anagia, produced thunder in 4 days, and the second, Asubo, did it in 7 days. But this 3rd son, whom he used to wish he could beat 3 times a day, produced thunder on his very first demonstration. How could his heart possibly remain calm? And from time to time, bursts of thunder still came from the training ground behind him, telling him that what had just happened was no accident. Avenge frowned at times and secretly smiled at others. Suddenly, he punched the big tree by the roadside, making the tree shake and leaves fall. Slightly angry, he cursed, "What was this brat doing all this time?" In the training ground, Asura had no idea that he had struck a blow to his old father's fragile self-esteem and remained fully immersed in cultivating the martial skill of the Benlay Fist, not leaving the training ground for the entire day. Even his meals were just simple food brought by servants for him to wolf down before going back to practice boxing. Several people secretly watched him from outside the grounds. Some stood with their hands behind their backs, some held wine jars in their arms. Some sat quietly in wheelchairs, some wore their hair in bun-top knots, and some had hair and beards all white. The boy tirelessly practiced the Benlay fist. Until at daybreak, when that first ray of sunlight shone onto the training ground, every one of the 8 Benlay punches the boy threw carried the sound of thunder. Asura slumped to the ground, chuckling foolishly, feeling the joy of success in martial training that he had never experienced before. After watching, several figures also turned and silently left. And from their somewhat lighter footsteps, one could sense that a kind of hope had been born in the general's residence. At noon, Asura silently packed up his things. He knew the time left for him was short. He had to hurry to Saint-Gobain Academy to take part in the entrance assessment. This was his only chance. Just then, a belt was handed to him from behind. The boy turned his head and saw the kind, smiling face of his grandfather, Adolf. Adolf spoke first. "Third boy, put on this belt. It has storage space in it. Although it only has space about the size of a study, it will make things much more convenient for you when you are away from home." Asura knew that the belt before him was the one the king had awarded his grandfather when he helped the kingdom of Aulai expand its territory and found the nation. This was the honor his grandfather had exchanged his life for, and now he was letting him wear it on a distant journey. The boy choked up and cried out, "Grandpa, I don't." Before the boy could finish, Adolf raised his hand to stop him and said, "No need to say more. It's only a storage belt. Being useful to you is its greatest use. Grandpa can't give you any particularly good equipment either. I only hope your path of study goes smoothly." The boy gritted his teeth and nodded heavily, then fastened the belt around his waist. With a probe of his thoughts, he entered the storage space inside the belt. The space was not large, but it was enough for the boy to store some weapons, clothes, and dry rations. Adolf looked at this tall grandson of his with satisfaction, as if he were looking at his younger self, exactly the same. At this moment, Qinlan also walked into the room carrying a wooden box, looking at her third son with a complicated expression. This youngest son was the naughtiest and the one most capable of making her angry. But he was also the son who knew best how to act spoiled and win her affection. "These are some medicinal pills your maternal grandfather left behind for treating illness and healing injuries. Though their grade isn't high, they are practical. Take this set of silver needles with you as well. Be careful in everything when you are away from home, and never let yourself get hurt." Hearing his mother's nagging, the boy in the past would have already covered his ears and run out. But now he could not bear to interrupt. It was not until Asubo pushed Anagia's wheelchair into the room that it stopped. Asubo had not been drinking today and had returned to his former martial arts maniac image. He took out a pair of twin blades from behind his back and said, "Shura, your second brother doesn't really have anything to give you for your journey of training. These twin blades are of fairly good quality, so take them for self-defense." Ashura grinned as he took the pair of blades, spun them in a flourish, and said, "Thanks, second brother. With these twin blades, I look even more like a master." Seeing his carefree, heartless-looking manner, Asubo felt much better too. After the incident, eldest brother Anaga, who had been taciturn and silent all along, also showed a long-lost smile on his face. He took out a money pouch, handed it over, and said, "Third brother, big brother doesn't have much to give you. Take this bag of gold coins for the road." Ashura glanced at the money pouch, but did not accept it. Instead, he frowned and asked, "Isn't this money meant as the bride price for sister-in-law?" Anaga's smile froze when he heard that. Then he gave a bitter smile and said, "The Blackwater family is powerful. Although she resisted desperately, the Sioux family of the Prime Minister has already returned this bride price." After a pause, he added with a smile, "Take it. I have no use for it anymore. If you don't take it, I'll leave it to your second brother as bride price instead. Then don't say your big brother is playing favorites." Ashura looked at his eldest brother, who had always stood in front of him whenever danger came. The big brother who had always pleaded for him and taken responsibility whenever he made mistakes. Suddenly, he smiled faintly and said, "All right, then I'll treat this money as big brother's investment in me, a future powerhouse. And when I become strong, I'll definitely repay you 100-fold. I guarantee this will be a profitable deal for you." Anaga could neither laugh nor cry when he heard this. He nodded deeply and handed over the money pouch. At this moment, a small, tender hand as white and delicate as a scallion also reached over. Clutching several gold coins in her hand, Azia, her face still streaked with tears, sobbed and said, Then I'll invest in third brother too. Third brother, remember to repay me 100-fold after you become a powerhouse. Asura looked at this little sister and first gave her a hug. Then he took the gold coin she handed him and said, I, Asura, always keep my word. Fair to children and elders alike. In the future, I will definitely return you a whole big bag of gold coins as your dowry. Azia broke into a smile through her tears, blushing as she hid in their mother's arms. The A family had always lived frugally and had always kept their children's expenses and allowances simple. Any occasional extra money would also be used as pensions for wounded and disabled warriors. These few gold coins were the girl's New Year money saved up over many years, and also all the possessions she had. After packing up all his things, Asura turned and walked out of the room. His father, Avenge, seemed to want to speak but hesitated. Asura turned around and said firmly, I will definitely become strong and come back to protect the family. Wait for me. After saying that, he swept his gaze deeply over everyone once more, wanting to imprint them all in his mind. Once he had looked enough, he did not linger, but ran a few steps and vaulted over the wall. He knew there were Blackwater family spies outside the door, and that if he went out through the front gate, he would be watched. The boy thought to himself, Blackwater family, just you wait. Today you force me to leave by climbing over the wall. One day when I return, I'll tear down your ancestral hall. After a few leaps and bounds, the boy disappeared at the end of the street. At the mouth of an alley on a street in the capital of the Kingdom of Avenge, Asura hid most of his body in the shadows. He cautiously observed the direction of the city gate. This was the third city gate he had checked. At every gate, there were people from Blackwater City, openly and covertly scanning everyone entering and leaving. Asura knew clearly that the moment he showed himself and tried to leave the city, he would certainly be hunted down. How to get out of the city had become the boy's biggest problem for the moment. Fortunately, this gate was in the opposite direction from Augustus Academy, and Blackwater City's defenses here were also the weakest. Looking at the bustling market inside the city and the endless stream of people at the gate, the boy grinned as an idea came to mind, and slowly retreated into the shadows of the alley. Before long, several half-grown children appeared to be going out of the city together to play. Not long after leaving the city, they hurriedly ran back, each clutching a silver coin and heading toward where the crowd was thickest. As they ran, they shouted loudly, Mother, there are silver coins in the grass outside the city, and we all picked some up. I want to eat braised pork. Everyone who heard this was dumbfounded. A woman who sold snacks stopped one of her own children, snatched the silver coin from the child's hand, bit it, and gasped, It really is a silver coin. The woman hurriedly asked her child where it was picked up. The child pointed outside the city and showed off, saying, We found it while playing in the woods not far outside the city. Mother, I want to buy some braised pork. Without betraying any emotion, the woman took the silver coin and slipped it into her pocket. One silver coin was enough to cover a family of three's expenses for a month. As for whether to eat braised pork, by the time she said this much, the quick-reacting people in the market had already started running out of the city. Those who reacted more slowly, seeing others running out of the city, also knew what to do. A stream of people could be seen shouting as they rushed out of the city. Even the Blackwater family's men guarding the place were baffled about what was going on. The crowd rushed out in a scramble, making it completely impossible to inspect those leaving the city. In no time, only a few peddlers who hadn't managed to pack up their stalls in time were left at the market by the city gate, beating their chests and stamping their feet in bitter regret. After a while, behind a large tree in the woods outside the city, Asura revealed himself. Just now, he had also run out with the crowd. This whole incident had been orchestrated by him from the start. The silver coin in the child's hand had also been given by him, and what was said had been taught by him as well. The reward was that if they did as he said and came back, they could get another silver coin. He had also placed a few more silver coins in the alley where he had hidden earlier, so the children would surely see them when they went to look for him again. Turning back to glance at the city gate of the capital of Olay, Asura's eyes were firm and profound. Carrying the twin blades his second brother had given him on his back, he ran in the direction of Saint-Gobain City. He did not take the main roads, choosing only side paths or cutting through forests. First, to guard against pursuit by the Blackwater family. Second, because he planned to kill wild beasts to improve his own strength. Because the assessment standard of Saint-Gobain Academy was warrior third rank. But unexpectedly, the wild beasts he killed along the way were very few. There were more bandits who wanted to rob him. Before, when he encountered bandits, he generally would not strike with lethal ruthlessness. That changed after one time he saw a poor girl about the same age as a Jia violated to death by bandits. From then on, he no longer felt any psychological burden when killing bandits. He had figured it out. Killing people could also mean saving people. Late at night, beside a stream in a forest, the black-haired youth Asura was roasting a wild wolf for dinner. Asura had always liked studying food. In the past, the small animals he caught had basically all ended up in his stomach. Now being able to eat wolf meat made him sigh with emotion, and it also led him to one conclusion. Wolf meat wasn't very tasty. The youth had already been away from home for more than 3 months, traveling every day and not daring to delay. The days of roughing it and killing bandits to eliminate evil had added a touch of wildness to him. The mischievous smile that had always been on his face before had now changed into a wicked grin. He had already broken through to Warrior's second stage, and it seemed that breakthroughs at such minor stages came to him as naturally as water flowing into a channel. Life surviving in the wild had also taught him many things, and it made him feel deeply lonely as well. He had always been someone who liked liveliness, yet in the 3 months since he came out, he had not had a proper conversation with anyone. The youth's temperament had also been tempered so that he was no longer flamboyant. When faced with matters, he had become calm and composed. Looking at the moon in the sky, the youth sighed and said, "I wonder how things are at home. Has grandfather returned? Has my eldest brother's leg been healed? Will sister-in-law keep waiting for him?" The youth muttered to himself. Leaning against the big tree behind him, he slowly fell asleep. He really was a little homesick. The next day, just as the sun had barely risen above the horizon, Asura had already awakened from his sleep and stretched lazily. After confirming the direction, he dashed towards Saint-Gobain City. His destination for today was a town called Linquan Town. Asura knew he had already left the Blackwater family's sphere of control. If he kept traveling on foot over mountains and across ridges like this, he definitely would not reach the academy on time. So he planned to go to Linquan Town to buy a mount for transportation and hurry to Saint-Gobain City as soon as possible. Linquan Town was a small town. It was said that the spring water gushing from a pool in the town was a spiritual spring, and that drinking it would increase one's strength and prolong life. Hearing this rumor, the youthful Asura also ran to the spiritual spring, lay down, and gulped the spring water in big mouthfuls. As a result, when he lifted his head, he discovered that a cow beside him was also lying by the spring drinking water just like him, and his mood instantly soured. Asura arrived at a broker shop that sold mounts. A thin, wiry man in his 40s with a goatee immediately came up to greet him. Although the boy was plainly dressed, one look at the bearing he carried while standing there told him he was a young master from a wealthy family. Bowing and scraping, he said, "My lord, my name is Chaha. It is an honor to serve you. Tell me whatever you need, and I will certainly make sure you leave satisfied." Asura glanced at him and said calmly, "I want to see what mounts you have." Chaha immediately led the way and said, "This way, my lord." Following Chaha's guidance, Asura arrived at the mount market, and it was also his first time in a place like this. All kinds of mounts were displayed in the animal pens for people to choose from. There were more than a dozen breeds of horses alone, as well as wind wolves, earth drakes, unicorns, and even magical beasts such as flying creatures that had been tamed for riding. Magical beast mounts needed to be tamed, and after being tamed they would be fitted with a beast taming ring. The ferocity of the magical beast would then be greatly reduced, and it would obey its master's commands. Of course, the higher a magical beast's rank, the harder it was to tame, unless it had been raised from a young age and had developed a sense of closeness. A weak master could not win a magical beast's submission. Of course, some powerful great families would keep magical beasts, and the magical beasts would submit to their clansmen, obey their orders, and be at their disposal, even in battle. Asura was extremely envious of those magical beasts, wondering whether riding one would look very impressive. But first, his own strength was too weak to control a magical beast, and second, he was afraid of being too conspicuous and bringing unnecessary trouble upon himself. Thinking of this, Asura directly said to the goateed man, "I want to buy a dragon horse for transportation. The faster it runs, the better. Do you have anything suitable?" After hearing this, Chaha was slightly disappointed. He had originally thought the boy would be a big spender. But after a brief moment of thought, he said, "My lord, we have a dragon horse here, extraordinarily majestic. Certainly a fine steed that can travel 1,000 li in a day. But it still has not been tamed even now and is wild and difficult to train. I wonder whether you are interested, my lord." Asura found it interesting as soon as he heard this, and immediately asked to be taken to see the dragon horse. Chaha led him to an animal shed, where he saw a tall black horse with its body bound by ropes. Its entire body was covered in black hair without a single stray color, and it was exceptionally magnificent. Nearby, two burly men took turns lashing it with whips. The black horse kept neighing, but in its cries one could clearly hear its unyielding will. Asura told the two men to stop, then circled the black horse twice with great interest. Seeing a black-haired boy like itself circling around it, the black horse snorted twice and looked at the boy with contempt. When Asura saw the black horse acting like this, he found it even more amusing, but he also truly liked this black dragon horse. As for how to tame it, his eyes turned, and a bad idea immediately came to mind. He turned and said to Chaha, "You all go out first. I'll have a chat with this dragon horse." Chaha was stunned for a moment, but did not object. He turned and left with the two beast tamers. The boy looked at the black horse with a mischievous grin. For some reason, the black horse felt a bit afraid of this boy when it saw his smile. Tilting his head, the boy said, "Can you understand what I'm saying?" The black horse ignored him and merely raised its head. The boy took out a bundle and said to himself, "I learned a bit of medicine from a young age. Here is a pack of silver needles. I don't know whether they work on horses, but I hope you'll behave, so I can let you experience the joy of acupuncture." Although the black horse was intelligent and could understand human speech, it had no idea what this acupuncture he spoke of was. Could such long needles be instruments of torture? Was he trying to make it submit through punishment? Asura pulled out a silver needle and said, "With the first needle, I'll make your left hind leg lose all feeling." Before the black horse could react, he flicked out a needle that pierced an acupoint on its left hind leg. The black horse felt no pain, but its left leg suddenly went numb and it nearly fell over. The black horse looked in horror as the boy, wearing a wicked grin, took out another needle. Then the boy said again, "This needle will make your right hind leg lose feeling." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked out another needle and stuck it into the black horse's right hind leg. The black horse's hind legs immediately drooped, and it sank into a sitting position on the ground. It still struggled, trying to make its hind legs stand up again. Asura slowly drew out another silver needle and said with a grin, "This needle should go into your front." "Oh, no, no, no. I forgot you've still got one more leg in the back. With this needle, I'll make the leg between your hips lose feeling too." As he spoke, he was about to flick the needle out with a wave of his hand. But this time, the black horse clamped its teeth tightly onto his sleeve. The black horse looked at the little devil before it, its eyes filled with fear and pleading. Slowly, it dropped to its two front knees. On the road beside a dense forest in the wilderness, a black-haired boy with twin blades on his back rode nimbly atop a fine black horse. The boy and horse had been galloping at full speed for an entire day without showing any sign of fatigue. The boy looked at the dim yellow sky and the surrounding terrain, patted the horse's head, and said, "Black charcoal, find a water source up ahead, and we'll stop to camp." The black horse let out a helpless snort. Black charcoal was the name the boy had given it. Although it disliked the name very much, it disliked even more being pricked by the boy's terrifying silver needles again. After finding a campsite with a water source, the boy jumped down from the horse and rubbed the insides of his thighs, sore from chafing. He patted black charcoal and let it go graze and drink on its own, completely unconcerned that black charcoal, wearing a beast-taming ring, might run away. Asura stepped into the jungle, planning to catch some game to fill his stomach. After leaving the camp and walking for quite a while, he found no traces of small animals moving about. Living rough in the open, he had already become an experienced hunter. Just as he was about to head deeper into the jungle, his ears suddenly twitched, and he quickly climbed to the top of a nearby tree. With a short blade drawn in his right hand and his left arm wrapped around the trunk, he concealed himself among the leaves and gradually slowed his breathing. Before long, he heard rustling in the dense forest, and soon a group of black-robed people emerged. With wide robes and long sleeves, black cloaks covered their heads, and from his high vantage point Asura could not see their faces. He only heard the leading black-robed figure walk to the front right of Ashura's hiding place, look down at the road below, and say in a hoarse voice, "This is the only road those little dwarfs must take. In a moment, set up the ghost lock formation here. Tomorrow, act on my command, and don't let a single one escape." The black-robed figures behind him answered in unison, "We obey the envoy's command." Then the many black-robed figures swiftly ran out toward the road and spread apart, forming a circular area with a radius of 10 jong. Judging from their running techniques, they were all fairly capable martial artists. Some dug pits and buried them, while others carved magic patterns. From the tree, Asura could clearly see every person's movements. Although he did not know what kind of formation this group was setting up, he had seen a general introduction to formations in his grandfather's miscellaneous books. Any formation needs to be prepared in advance, requiring the drawing of magic patterns and the placement of energy magic cores. The final step of setting up a formation is the so-called formation eye, which is also the key to breaking it. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the leading man in black looked at the results of everyone's work and nodded in satisfaction. Then he took 8 steps to the right and 9 steps back, and planted a small black flag into the ground behind a large tree. The moment the flag was inserted into the ground, the circular area of Tenjong immediately erupted with a burst of ghostly wailing before returning to silence. The man in black let out a sinister cackle for a while, then waved his hand, and the black-robed figures vanished into the dense forest. At first, Asura thought it was people from the Blackwater family coming after him, but from the looks of it, they were obviously not here for him. He could sense danger from this group. But now he was caught in a dilemma. He guessed that these black-robed people were hiding not far away, and he feared that if he moved, he would be discovered and cause unnecessary trouble. What the boy worried about most was whether that stupid horse would come looking for him if it saw that he had not returned for a long time. If that happened, he would be exposed. He did not think he could escape with only his second-stage warrior strength, and he kept praying in his heart for safety. Just like that, the boy clung to the big tree and stayed tense all night. His black charcoal also did not appear, just as he had wished. The feeling of staying up all night in nervous tension was extremely unpleasant. The boy just wanted to leave this dangerous place as soon as possible and not delay his trip to take the entrance exam for Saint-Gobain Academy. The dense forest around him remained utterly silent, without the slightest chirp of insects or birds. And he had no idea where those black-robed people were hiding. He endured like this until noon, when Asura was starting to feel drowsy. Suddenly, the sound of hoofbeats came from afar, and Asura instantly woke up and looked into the distance. He saw a convoy slowly approaching from the end of the road ahead. As the convoy gradually came closer, Asura discovered that it was actually a dwarven convoy. There were a total of 10 horse-drawn wagons loaded with goods, surrounded by more than 20 dwarf warriors. They were very short but sturdily built, wore leather armor, and all had big beards, holding the same weapon, battle axes, in their hands. The battle axe carried by the leading dwarf chief was almost as tall as he was, and his knotted muscles were full of power. He walked at the very front, surveying the surroundings, seeming to frown slightly, but he did not stop walking. It was Asura's first time seeing dwarves. He had never left the kingdom of Ally before, and everything outside was new to him. He had heard from his grandfather that dwarves all had bad tempers, but were kind and simple by nature. Dwarves were especially skilled in forging and loved alcohol as much as life itself. However, dwarves were not exactly friendly toward humans, and it was difficult for humans to gain their friendship. Asura guessed that the targets of those black-robed people were these dwarf warriors before him, because that black-robed leader last night had said things like this bunch of dwarves. Asura felt that those black-robed people were not good people. Unable to bear watching the dwarf warriors walk into a trap, he did not dare make any move and could only worry in secret for the dwarf warriors. When the dwarf convoy had completely entered that Tenjong area, the horses pulling the wagons seemed frightened and stood still on the spot. The dwarf leader finally sensed the danger and waved to halt the convoy. The dwarf warriors all raised their battle axes into defensive positions and watched the surroundings vigilantly. "You dwarves have finally shown up. I've been waiting for you for a long time." As this hoarse voice rang out, black-robed figures emerged from all parts of the dense forest and surrounded the dwarf convoy in the middle. The dwarves showed no fear at all. Instead, they were brimming with fighting spirit. The leading dwarven warrior slammed his battle axe heavily into the ground and roared, "Who are you people? Was it you who attacked our tribe before? Are you ready to face the wrath of the dwarves?" His voice was so loud that it shook the leaves from the trees with a rustling sound. The black-robed leader said disdainfully, "No need to ask who we are. From now on, just call me master. Obediently come back with me and forge iron. You dwarves are still quite useful." As soon as he finished speaking, the dwarven leader hefted his giant axe and charged at the black-robed men. Dwarves were not good with words, but their towering rage and razor-sharp giant axes were the best answer they could give. But before the dwarven leader had gone far, many scarlet chains suddenly shot up from underground, binding each dwarven warrior one after another. The dwarven warrior leader exploded with rage and swung his giant axe to hack at the chains. But the red chains were like flowing water. As soon as they were cut, they immediately reformed, and the dwarven warrior's movements grew slower and slower. The black-robed man cackled. "Once you've entered my ghost chain array, your lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Dwarves, stop resisting and obediently become my slaves to forge iron." The dwarven warriors paid him no attention, only constantly trying to break free from those strange red chains. The black-robed leader showed displeasure and said sinisterly, "Since you don't know what's good for you, then let's kill a few disobedient slaves." With that, he waved his hand, and the surrounding black-robed men drew their weapons and charged at the dwarven warriors. Because the dwarven warriors were restrained by the chains, it wasn't long before some dwarves were wounded. The dwarven leader fought 4 black-robed men by himself without falling behind. After seeing this, the black-robed leader let out a cold snort, drew a black dagger, and attacked the dwarven warrior leader. The black-robed leader was clearly quite powerful. With Asura's strength, he couldn't tell his martial level at all. He could only hide in the tree and worry for the dwarves. With the black-robed leader joining the fight, the dwarven warrior leader was clearly falling into a disadvantage, and his giant axe swings became slower and slower. Just when the black-robed men thought the outcome had already been decided, the dwarven warrior leader suddenly let out a roar, his fighting spirit surging. Then his muscles swelled, and a faint red flame ignited around his body, and the blood-red chains binding him also loosened somewhat. Then the dwarven leader used one of his powerful martial skills to send the 5 black-robed men surrounding him flying. All 5 were injured and knocked to the ground. Even the black-robed leader spat out a mouthful of blood, clearly badly hurt. Asura watched with great excitement. It was his first time seeing such an intense fight. Just now, the dwarven warrior leader had probably used his innate battle skill, and his combat power had suddenly risen to a whole new level. Seeing that the dwarven warriors had gained a slight upper hand, Asura felt much more at ease, and at the same time became even more eager to grow stronger. After sending the 5 men flying, the dwarven leader turned around to help the other dwarven warriors kill the black-robed men. Seeing that most of the dwarven warriors were wounded made his fury erupt. He turned his head and fixed his gaze on the black-robed leader who had just been injured. With a roar, he charged over with axe in hand, raising the battle axe high, intending to split the black-robed leader in 2. The black-robed leader was both shocked and enraged. He had not expected this dwarf to be so formidable. It seemed he had still underestimated this race. A vicious gleam flashed in his eyes as both hands reached for the chests of the 2 injured subordinates beside him. In the next instant, he crushed both of their hearts with one claw and shouted, "Blood sacrifice, ghost bind." With his movement, the formation suddenly shone with a bright blood-red light, and the chains that had been slack on the dwarf warrior leader suddenly tightened. Several more chains also appeared, tightly wrapping around the giant axe raised in midair and stopping it in place. The dwarf warrior leader struggled with all his might, but could not break free from the chains. His already short body was wrapped all over in red chains. When the other dwarves saw their leader trapped, they wanted to rescue him, but were desperately held back by the other black-robed men. The black-robed leader stood up with a sinister cackle. Brushing the dust off his body, he walked up to the dwarf warrior leader and said, "You dwarf actually dare to resist. Do you really think I can't deal with you? Once I place a seal on you, you'll become my strongest slave. Haha, don't worry, I'll keep capturing more dwarves to keep you company. Being slaves of our great organization, Shuezhao, is the honor of your dwarf race." Asura grew more alarmed the more he listened from the tree. What do these black-robed people want with so many dwarves? And he had never heard of this organization called Shuezhao. Judging by the way these people acted, they seemed like an evil organization, especially using their own subordinates as blood sacrifices to activate formation skills. They were utterly insane. The dwarf warrior leader was even more humiliated and furious, gathering all his strength to bring down the giant axe. But the axe was trapped by the chains and could not move downward in the slightest. Seeing this, the black-robed man burst into laughter. Laughing, he walked one step closer to the dwarf leader, the giant axe raised by the dwarf warrior being less than a fist's distance away from him. The black-robed leader looked at the dwarf warrior leader mockingly and said, "Come on, swing it. Go ahead and chop, if you can. Be a good little slave, dwarf." With that, he reached out as if to pat the dwarf warrior leader's furious face. But suddenly, the red chains that had been binding the dwarf and the giant axe flickered once and disappeared. Driven by the force and momentum of the dwarf warrior's exertion, the giant axe came crashing down viciously, easily splitting the completely unprepared black-robed leader in 2 from his left shoulder. Everyone stopped fighting and stared blankly at the scene before them. The dwarf warrior leader also stumbled forward from the sudden disappearance of the restraint, and he too had no idea what had happened. Only the black-robed leader's half-dead remained slowly turned to look behind him. There stood a person beneath a large tree not far away, one arm covering his face, while in the other hand he held a small black flag. And that flag was precisely the formation core he had planted last night. The black-robed leader wanted to say something, but blood was already gushing from his mouth in great mouthfuls. His eyes remained wide open for a long time, unwilling to close, as if he wanted to see clearly who exactly was the one who had done him in. Everyone also realized what had happened, and without the restraint of the red chains, the dwarf warriors erupted with astonishing combat power. The black-robed men, having just lost their leader, also fell into chaos and had no will to keep fighting, and were chased down and cut apart by the dwarf warriors, turning the situation into a one-sided slaughter. Standing behind the big tree, Asura kept one arm across his face to hide his appearance while clutching the small black flag and nervously watching the battlefield. He was afraid that some black-robed man might break away from the battlefield and come after him for revenge. Fortunately, it wasn't long before the battle ended, and the black-robed men all died one after another, leaving only the dwarven warriors heavy breathing on the battlefield. Seeing that not a single black-robed man had escaped, Asura secretly let out a sigh of relief. He also did not want to stir up more trouble, so facing the battlefield, he slowly backed away. But the dwarf warrior leader suddenly shouted at him, "Stop!" Then he charged toward him with great strides. Asura had just witnessed the terror of the dwarf warrior leader's charge. The only difference this time was that he wasn't raising his giant axe. But that imposing momentum still left Ashura's hands and feet cold and sent chills down his spine. The dwarf warrior leader charged up in front of Asura, warily sizing up the boy who was still covering his face with his arm, then glanced at the flag in his hand, as if deep in thought. Asura lowered his head to look at the approaching dwarf warrior, afraid this not-so-bright-looking dwarf might misunderstand something again. He quickly said, "I mean no harm, I just helped you." Then he recounted exactly how he had arrived here last night, and how he had been trapped in the tree, witnessing everything that happened. By then, he was also surrounded by dwarf warriors. After hearing Ashura's account, the dwarf warrior leader was the first to dismiss the red flames covering his body. As the red flames disappeared, the dwarf warrior's imposing aura suddenly weakened as well. From the storage space he carried with him, he took out a large wine barrel, opened the lid, and gulped it down. Some of the dark red liquor dripped from his beard onto the ground, and Asura could clearly smell the strong scent of alcohol. Seeing the dwarf drink like that, Asura couldn't help clicking his tongue inwardly. Grandpa was right after all when he said dwarves were as fond of drink as life itself. Asura himself didn't know why he had been so bold as to get involved in that battle. Perhaps the kindness in his heart had played the decisive role. All he could do was destroy the magic array, and covering his face with his arm was also because he feared ruining the black-robed men's plans, and then having them see what he looked like and take out their anger on him. After the dwarf warrior leader had drunk more than half a barrel of strong liquor, it was obvious he looked much more refreshed. Seeing Asura still covering his face with his arm, he suddenly burst into laughter. Then he reached out and pulled Asura right in front of him, giving him a big hug. His thick arm patted the boy's back hard as he said sincerely, "Thank you, my friend." As the dwarf leader pulled him over, Ashura's raised arm was also dragged aside, revealing his youthful face. But that sincere hug nearly made the boy lose his breath. The two pats the dwarf warrior gave his back hurt so much that he bared his teeth in pain and couldn't speak for a while. Seeing Asura like this, the surrounding dwarves all burst into laughter as well. The dwarf warrior leader also realized how frail the boy's body was, and scratched his head awkwardly before saying again, "My friend, my name is Kassa. What is your name?" As he spoke, he also handed the wine barrel beside him to the boy. Asura was still leaning on the tree and taking a deep breath when a strange thought suddenly popped into his head. Father still loves me. From childhood until now, he's beaten me so many times. But every time, he never hit as hard as this dwarf's palm. He quickly shook his head to interrupt this strange thought, then looked at the warm gazes of the dwarf warriors before him. The boy's mood brightened considerably, and he smiled as he said, "My name is Asura. I'm from the kingdom of Alai." He casually took the dwarf warrior leader's wine barrel. It was quite heavy, and the boy imitated the dwarf warrior and took a gulp. What Asura didn't know was that if a dwarf, who loved alcohol as much as life itself, was willing to share his fine wine with you, That meant you had gained the dwarves' sincere friendship. What the boy knew even less was that what the dwarf Casa had handed him was the dwarves' war god's wine. The liquor was so strong that it felt like molten lava pouring down his throat as soon as it entered his mouth. And it also had miraculous effects. When Asura was mischievous in his early years, he often stole his grandfather's and father's wine to drink, and over time he built up quite a tolerance for alcohol. But he had never expected the dwarves' liquor to be so strong. The moment it went down his throat, Asura's face instantly flushed red and his whole body turned crimson. The alcohol rushed to his head, and the chi and blood within him surged and could no longer be suppressed, breaking through his warrior level 3 bottleneck in one stroke. Asura was both shocked and delighted. He had never imagined that a single mouthful of wine would let him break through to warrior level 3, which also met the entrance requirement for Saint-Gobain Academy. The problem he had been worrying about all along, that traveling would keep him from training and leave his martial realm too low to get into the academy, was solved just like that with ease. The boy was overjoyed. He lifted the barrel again and took another huge gulp of the dwarf's liquor. After it entered his mouth, he could barely keep his footing and almost fell over. This time, although his chi and blood also churned vigorously with vitality, he no longer felt that same sensation of breaking through a realm as with the first mouthful. The surrounding dwarves couldn't help but burst into hearty laughter at the boy's drunken state. Seeing the boy's awkward predicament, the dwarf warrior leader Casa guessed what he was thinking and said, "My friend, this is our dwarves' war god wine, the finest wine in all the world. Drinking it can invigorate chi and blood, heal wounds and relieve pain, restore combat strength, remove negative conditions, raise fighting spirit, and strengthen yang and nourish the kidneys, among other effects. Of course, the first mouthful has the best effect. Did you break through a minor realm? Every mouthful after that won't be as powerful as the first, but each still has all kinds of beneficial effects. Once you get yourself a wife, drink a mouthful like this every night, and I guarantee you'll be full of fighting spirit every night." Asura hurriedly waved his hand to cut off the dwarf, who was getting more and more outrageous as he spoke. The usually inarticulate dwarf seemed to become endlessly talkative whenever fine wine was mentioned. As for Asura, he was still an innocent 14-year-old boy, full of longing and curiosity about contact with the opposite sex. But he still wasn't thick-skinned enough to talk about such topics in public. Asura handed back the wine barrel, bowed to the dwarves, and thanked them. "Thank you for sharing your fine wine. I like it very much, and it even helped me advance by a minor realm. I've never had such good wine." When the dwarf warriors heard Asura praise their war god wine as delicious, each one beamed with pride and delight, feeling even happier than if he had praised their bravery. Casa was especially pleased. Grabbing Asura by the arm, he said, Come back to our tribe with me. You are our friend, and I want to introduce you to everyone in our tribe. There'll be plenty of fine wine and roast meat." As he spoke, he pulled Asura toward the caravan. Asura quickly grabbed the hand clutching him like an iron vice and said in a fluster, "Not this time, Casa. Although I'd really like to visit your tribe, I still have more important things to do. I need to go enroll and study at Saint-Gobain Academy. The journey is long, and with less than 3 months left, I don't even know whether I can make it in time. I can't afford to go having fun and waste time." Casa stopped and turned to look at the anxious boy. Knowing that he truly had urgent business to attend to, he said helplessly, "All right then. Saint-Gobain City is still very far from here, and a war is breaking out ahead between the Kingdom of Baluin and the Kingdom of Yeti, so the road is blocked. You'll need to take a detour, and time is indeed tight." Asura was astonished when he heard this. Luckily, he had run into the dwarves and learned this news. Otherwise, if he had plunged straight into the territory of the warring nations, getting back out would have been troublesome. Perhaps this was what it meant for good people to be rewarded. After steadying himself, Asura asked, "Casa, do you know who these black-robed people are? Why did they attack you?" Hearing this, Casa silently walked over to the dismembered black-robed leader and pulled open the black cloak, revealing beneath it a bald man with a pale face. After searching the body, they found a spatial belt. After the owner dies, the imprint on the storage space disappears. Opening the spatial belt, they found some gold and silver coins, as well as some medicinal pills and a change of clothes. The only thing somewhat worth investigating was a beast hide map. When he opened the map, Casa was filled with rage. He said in a deep voice, "I don't know who these black-robed men are either, but some time ago our tribe was attacked by them. When they couldn't defeat us, they surrounded our tribe. The teams that went out to purchase supplies were often attacked by them, and many clansmen disappeared because of this. This time I led the team out to purchase supplies. If not for your help, our squad probably would have met a grim fate as well. This map marks the locations of several of our dwarf tribes. It seems the other dwarf tribes have also been attacked. A goblin tribe very close to us was attacked as well. I need to go back and report all of this to the clan chief. Asura was also very surprised after hearing this. Who would dare provoke the wrath of the dwarves? This race was famous for its violent temper. At this moment, Asura noticed a tattoo of a black sun and moon on the black-robed leader's body. This tattoo gave people an extremely unpleasant feeling. Asura said, "During the battle, I heard him say something about taking you to an organization called Blood Zhao to forge iron. I wonder if you've heard of this organization?" Casa shook his big head full of beard. Never heard of it. Aside from buying some daily necessities, we dwarves basically do not interact with other races. We have never provoked any organization either. I didn't expect someone would actually set their sights on us. Are they prepared to face our battle axes? Casa angrily waved his giant axe, which seemed even taller than he was. Asura, standing to the side, swallowed nervously, afraid that the battle axe might accidentally graze his body. The last person whose body had brushed against this battle axe was still lying on the ground in two halves. At this time, the other dwarves also piled up the spoils collected from the dead black-robed men in front of them. Asura looked at the pile of items and saw that there was nothing particularly valuable. Asura asked Casa, "How should these spoils be handled?" Casa said indifferently, "Take whatever you like. I just need that map to go back and report the news." After hearing this, Asura did not stand on ceremony and gathered some healing pills into his own storage belt. He did not touch the gold and silver coins or the other items, because he had heard that dwarves often needed to go by daily necessities, and these gold and silver coins might be more important to them. Seeing Asura's actions, Casa also thought more highly of the young man. He decided that this young friend was truly good-hearted. After thinking for a moment, with a pained expression, he took from his storage belt 2 barrels of war god wine and said, "My friend, since you need to hurry on your journey, I won't insist on keeping you. Take these 2 barrels of war god wine to drink on the road. Next time you pass by, be sure to visit our tribe, and we'll have a good drink together. Our tribe is in the cave of Mount Failing ahead." Seeing the 2 barrels of war god wine, Asura's eyes lit up, and he happily put them into his storage belt. This kind of fine wine with miraculous effects is something that can only be encountered by chance, not sought after. As he put away the wine, he said to Casa, Definitely. When my academy goes on break, I'll come find you and hang out. You should also be careful of that organization called Blood Zhao. If it really comes to it, your several tribes should gather together and resist that organization together." Hearing this, Casa's eyes lit up, thinking this was an excellent idea. Human brains really were much smarter. Asura also hugged the other dwarves one by one in farewell. Dwarven friendship was simple and sincere. Then he waved his hand and ran toward the previous campsite. On the way back to the campsite, Asura suddenly pulled a small flag out from his chest. It was the array corps the black-robed leader had used earlier to set up the formation. The more Asura looked at the little flag, the more uncomfortable he felt. With a casual wave of his hand, he threw it into the river ahead. The small black flag drifted up and down with the current, floating off into the distance. Asura hurried back to the previous campsite and saw that his black horse was still there, leisurely grazing, looking perfectly at ease. Asura was instantly furious and let out a cold sneer as he walked toward Hyten. Hyten was in a wonderful mood. That little devil of a master hadn't come back for almost a whole day and night. Had he forgotten about it? If he still doesn't come back after a few more days, I'll be free, able to leave this place and run free. Before it could finish its sweet dream, it saw the boy approaching with a wicked grin. The moment it saw that smile, all 5 of its horse legs trembled, and it immediately ran over fawningly, rubbing its head affectionately against its master's arm. Just as Asura was about to teach this disloyal horse a lesson, he then thought about how he had already wasted a whole day and should hurry on his journey. With a cold snort, he swung himself onto the horse and galloped wildly toward Saint-Gobain. What the boy didn't know was that on the 3rd day after he left, by a nearby river, 2 black-robed men stood on the rocks by the shore. One of them held a soaking wet little flag in his hand and said in a hoarse voice, "This is the array flag I lent to Envoy Nilo. Since it appeared here, that means he has already failed." After a pause, he continued, "Who exactly ruined our plan? If he had my array flag with him, then with the soul mark I left on it, I would find him sooner or later. But he actually threw away the array flag. It seems this person is either an extremely powerful expert or an array master. The other person said, since a powerful expert has appeared, that means someone has their eyes on us. Inform our people in this area to stop all activity and hide, awaiting the organization's orders. Then their figures vanished from atop the huge rock. The powerful expert who the two black-robed men guessed had thrown away the flag was at this very moment galloping toward the distance. A simple decision by the boy allowed him to avoid a huge crisis. But it also seemed that he had become caught up in a massive vortex of conspiracy.